Hi, I'm Rob Buckingham and welcome to Bayside TV. Today on the show we have Compliments of Gus performing and we look at an issue that has a lot of parents divided.
Some parents are kind of like superheroes. They are constantly saving the day and using their powers for good and not evil. But children can sometimes be villains, and parents have to make a quick disciplinary decision. If we want to be superhero parents, what should we do? To slap or not to slap?
Great topic today on Bayside TV, to slap or not to slap. Dr. Lindsay Atkins is our special guest. Welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Lindsay, you're a clinical child psychologist.
I am,
So
yes.
you bring a lot to the table on this, to slap or not to slap. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say. And we also have Justin Michael Gall with us from Compliments of Gus. And good to have you here. You're going to be singing for us a little bit later.
I am going to be singing, and Christy's doing BVs.
Yeah, is that right?
Yeah, right.
So what does BV stand for?
Backing vocals.
See, she's down.
I thought, I know
I'm
it stands
on
for backing vocal, but I thought in Christy's case it might stand for something else.
Watch up vocals.
Apart from singing, you are here as a parent.
Sure, yeah, I've got two little fellas. Was that what we're going to ask?
Yeah.
Two boys.
Yeah.
Okay.
How old are they?
They're 6 and 3, both perfect.
Of
Yeah,
course.
they would be.
Yeah, stunning children.
And Christy B, welcome.
I'm glad to be here.
First thing I want to know is, were you smacked as a child? Christy?
Absolutely, I was. And would you believe it? This Christmas, we had this conversation with my parents, and they said, "You were never smacked?" And I'm like, oh,
Talking about a different household.
were we brought up in the same household? And then they meant, well, yes, well, that's not counted. Like,
That's not a
just that
smack.
little,
Right.
that's not counted. And maybe it's not, maybe it's not the kind of smack that people are talking about. Yeah.
What about you, Lindsay? Were you smacked as a child?
Yeah, I was smacked as a child. I think what's really interesting is that my mum would now say in no way would she approve of me smacking my daughter or any of my siblings
that's
smacking
interesting,
their
isn't it?
children. So, yeah.
So I'm going to smack you, but leave my grandkids alone.
Yeah, a generational thing.
Yeah, sure. And were you? I could tell you were smacked.
Yeah, I think when you've got a rowdy personality. Yeah, look, certainly we were. Dad was a school principal, and so he grew up in the era where I think they trained them in teachers' college to here's how to discipline children.
A degree in smackology.
Sure, look,
Well,
he
they
was.
used canes, didn't they?
Oh my goodness, he was fluent in all of the different versions.
Corporal punishment.
He had a cane and he had a strap, and but he also
Don't give us his address. There'll be people out there who'll want to go after him.
Well, I think he was of the generation of teachers that really struggled through that change in schools where suddenly it was banned and you weren't allowed to do it, and they went through this struggle of, well, how on earth are we going to, control?
The fear of it kept me from it. I mean, I went to school when they were allowed to use the cane, and the fear of being caned kept me from doing things that I shouldn't have done.
I actually never ever got the cane at school. I went through all of my. Isn't that
That's
amazing?
amazing.
Because
That's
I
a
was so
miracle.
good.
Boring.
But I did get. Yes, that's right. No, good. But I did get smacked as a child at home.
Yeah.
I guess right at the beginning here, I want to distinguish between discipline that would go too far and step into child abuse,
Absolutely.
as opposed to what we would refer to as parental smacking.
But what about just the smack? Just the clip on the side of the leg or the bottom? Are we, when we're talking about no smacking, are we talking about none of that? Like when you say
no physical restraint? Is that what you're talking about?
physical touching at all.
I think you can't go that, but certainly with little guys, with don't touch the stove, don't climb the ladder, don't walk over the balcony, you grab them and I mean, oftentimes the very swift act of grabbing my little fella, it scares me. Oh, Dad just, so I don't need to smack necessarily. Certainly Dad's
voice. But you
voice...
use a little bit of force to redirect him from danger.
Yeah, for sure. But no, and I should point out too, I'd said before my dad knew how to use he didn't use those things on me. It was just one of those things we grew up with more of probably what you were talking about. If Dad sees this, he goes, mate, come on,
that's
come on.
Lindsay, I want to know,
Lindsay?
how effective is smacking, or isn't it effective at all?
And what are we calling smacking? Can we define smacking? Is any smacking... I know, no, I'm serious.
Yeah.
Is there any smacking that's okay, in your mind?
In my mind, as a child psychologist, I would say that there are more effective ways to discipline children than smacking. What a lot of the research shows us is actually that smacking is ineffective. In fact, it can lead to long-term psychological problems in children. There's 2 studies that have been done fairly recently. One that I think is striking is an Australian study that it's looked at 5,000 children in Melbourne over a course of 10 years. And what we can say from that is actually that the strongest predictor of behavioural problems in children is harsh discipline. So parents
So what
that
if it's not
frequently, well, it's parents that frequently manage their children's behaviour by smacking or yelling. So
Those two would go together, would they not? Most people who are angry are smacking and they're yelling and they're doing all. Is the smack often an outcome of a very angry parent?
I would hope not.
But that's what I'm
Yeah.
thinking is the bad kind of the.
yeah, look, what's really interesting in another study is they actually controlled for that. They controlled for parent anger, they controlled for parent mental health issues, drug and alcohol abuse, they also controlled for socioeconomic background.
Okay.
What they found was that smacking was still a significant predictor of aggressive behaviour in children.
Wow.
So what they actually found was that children that were smacked often, so in terms of once a week, when they were 3, predicted the level of aggression at 5.
Well, I can't even begin to imagine why you would have to smack a 3-year-old once a week. I can't even imagine that. But I also can see the children that we associate with that are never smacked, that are reasoned with beyond all reason, are actually not the greatest kids to be around. And so this is what's confusing me. I'm thinking if you use all those other methods, but you occasionally use the smack, like, does it have to be taken out of the toolkit altogether, like a non-harsh smack?
Can it be the last resort in the arsenal, as it were?
What I would say to that is that in terms of children do need discipline. So all children need discipline.
Yep.
The best way to discipline children is what we know is behaviour modification.
Yep.
So it's focusing on positive reinforcement for behaviours that you do want to see. You reward the child for that.
Yep.
Lots
Can
of
you
positive
give us an
encouragement.
example of what you would do as a parent in that regard?
Yeah, so I guess in terms of something that if you want your child to play independently, for example, and they're kind of hassling you all the time and you're on the phone and they don't give you a minute's peace, then when you actually catch them playing independently, you would say, go up at their level, look them in the eye and say, great job of playing on your own there. So actually that verbal positive reinforcement is really important. Then it's also a case of ignoring mild negative behaviour. So if you catch your child doing something that isn't so bad, you don't bother telling them off for it, reprimanding.
So you pick your battles.
Exactly. But then when it comes to more serious behaviour violations or, problematic behaviour, then, you do discipline children for that. But children benefit much more from consequences than they do from smacking. That's what we know from the research.
Is there any research anywhere that says...
I knew you were going to ask this.
Well, I just want to know, just to balance it out a little bit,
Yeah.
because it is really, really hard, because we've done what we
Actually,
do.
you know what? We're going to pick that up right after the break,
cool.
OK? I'd really love to know the answer to that. After the break, join us with Campbell Vandersloot and Word on the Street with Street Talk and much, much more here on Bayside TV.
When I was a child, if I was naughty, I was disciplined with a wooden spoon, but today that's frowned upon. So what is the best way to discipline a naughty child? What is the best way to discipline a naughty child?
Well, there's a range of ways that you can do it, but one of the best ways you can do it is to remove something that they're looking forward to and to encourage them to engage in the positive behaviour.
I would say, I'm a bit old school with this, I say smack on the bottom.
All right, do you have children yourself?
I don't, but I was smacked. On the bottom only.
Yeah, so you're passing that smacking on.
Well, I think by the time I have kids, I won't be allowed to do that.
Leave them alone till they calm down, time out, relax, and then ready to play again.
To put them in the naughty corner is probably the best way, I think.
Exclusion.
Exclusion. No, just like for a few minutes and so they know and can think about what they've done or whatever.
I'd have to say the best way to discipline a naughty child is to definitely take something of theirs that they value most and just disallow them from having it for a while.
What is the best way to discipline a naughty child?
I would probably put he or she in his or her bedroom. definitely, I would.
By themselves?
By themselves, without anything to do.
Give them a smack, I reckon. When I was a kid, we got the wooden spoon. That worked pretty well. We always scare the wooden spoon, so yeah.
Would you do that to your children?
Definitely, yep. It worked for me. I turned out pretty well, so I'd give it to my kids.
Something naughty. It depends how naughty it is. I've got 4 kids, so yeah, I don't know what the answer is.
Withdrawing privileges, I think.
Yep. Okay. So not necessarily time out.
No.
Yeah. And when you were saying that you withdrew privileges, do you have an example of that?
Take away the push bike. Take away the television.
Some interesting responses there. I think a few people have been watching Super Nanny.
Yes.
What's your response to some of those suggestions, Lindsay?
I think there were some really good suggestions there. I don't agree with the smacking idea, but certainly about removal of privileges and basically having consequences that are logical and immediate consequences as well. So if something's wrong, then, discipline.
Part of the reason that you don't agree with the smacking is because of the research that you've seen against it, but also because you've seen children at the other side of the spectrum that have been traumatised. Yeah. The interesting thing is that some of those people said, including myself and Justin and probably Rob, well, we turned out not too bad. So what about, is there any research out there at all that says that it's okay as long as it's not abusive?
Yeah, there actually is a US study that was published about 5 years ago, and they actually looked at long-term outcomes from the other direction, so were there any positive outcomes, and they actually found that you were more likely to go to university if you were smacked.
Wow.
And actually have a higher paid job.
Wow.
And there were actually higher levels of respect for parents.
Incredible.
So
I'm going to go straight home and smack my kids.
But I'm actually not familiar with the study. It was just something I found on the net. It was in a journal. But yeah, I'd be interested to know some more about the study.
So, because one of the things that I find is that parents who don't smack don't do anything. Maybe it's not the fact that they don't smack that their kids are like, oh.
They haven't actually got a process.
But it's maybe because they don't actually know some of the other methods that you might think are effective.
Yeah, and that goes back to all children need to be disciplined. That's how children learn self-control, that's how children learn boundaries. So to be disciplined is really important, but you can be disciplined without being smacked.
I think it comes a lot down to the parent themselves being a disciplined person, doesn't it? If you're a disciplined person that's working on self-control, that's working on patience and care and those kind of things.
Don't you think you look at your kids? Yeah, but hey, we look at our kids sometimes and go, why don't they want to shower 3 times a day? Or like, where did they? A teenager who doesn't want to tidy up their room, and we are both tidy.
Right.
So
I guess maybe they'll learn your characteristics, not necessarily. I mean, behaviours are always going to push boundaries. That's what we
Hopefully it'll kick in sometime. I mean, the whole smacking thing certainly is a pretty hot debate. I put it up on my Facebook page a few weeks ago, and literally it went off. It was like over 100 responses in a day, and I ended up writing a blog on our website about smacking and just giving different perspectives on it. Now, you did the same.
I did, because I thought I'm not coming on here with a clinical psychologist and just my opinion.
Being an ignorant
so I got
you get the opinion of the rest of the masses.
Well, the rest of the masses, because Facebook, I don't know if you've noticed, is full of opinions. So I thought I'll have some friends out there that have no trouble giving their opinion.
It's actually not opinions. Once you've asked for it, it becomes advice.
Oh, advice, there you go. Well, a number of people started with no comment, no comment, no comment, and then we started to get things like, certainly the I was smacked and I turned out okay was one of the key ones. One of the other ones was, look at the youth of today, aren't they terrible? That's what happens when you don't smack them. I find that to be a fairly common opinion. And then there's another friend of mine who's actually raising 3 boys who have varying degrees of ADD type disorders and quite serious, and she was just questioning everybody. It was just an interesting kind of idea. And I find now with a lot of my friends who have children with behavioural, diagnosed behavioural disorders, there's this whole new paradigm of, my goodness, that old school idea of just slap the child. Certainly people go, what is it? If you spare the rod, you spoil the child, and those kind of things. But a lot of people did talk about the character of the parents and the ability of the parent to be calm, to be able to step away from the scenario and to take a deep breath. It's, you know, you tell the child to count to 10, and I think the advice
Parents
from
need to do
this
that.
lot was, you know, parents count to 10.
I would totally agree with that.
Yeah.
You know, you never discipline out of anger.
Ever.
You know, it's always been calm and then approaching it. I would sit our kids down and talk to them and ask them why they think that they're in trouble right now and give me some feedback on it.
In actual fact, some of those disciplinary methods like exclusion, etc., does that not, you know...
Is that not damaging as well?
Yeah, like
Depends on the child's personality.
Our kids would sometimes say, I remember
They'd
they'd
rather
say,
be put...
could we please have a smack and get this over with?
Yeah.
And we're like, no, we're going to work through this.
We're going to draw this out.
Yeah. There are principles you can draw on, though, from behaviour management. So what you're looking at is the timing of the discipline.
okay.
So you want it to happen immediately after the event so that the child knows why they're being disciplined. You'd want it to be consistent. So you wouldn't want to get time out for one issue and then not get time out for another issue, because then it's perceived as punishment. It depends on where the timeout is. Obviously, you'd like it to be quite near the parent, so it's quite reassuring for the child in the same room. And then it depends on the length of the timeout as well. So it's approximately 2 minutes for each year of age.
We've been
of the
underdoing
child.
it. We just do 1 minute
We
for
thought it
each
was 1
year.
minute for every
Super
year.
Nanny is wrong. 2 minutes.
No, wait, TV lied?
I get 6 minutes of peace. Oh no, 8 minutes of peace with my. I was only doing 4.
That's toast and
And then
cup
if
of
the
tea.
child actually leaves the timeout chair or the allocation, then you put them back and the time starts again.
Does it differ for a two-parent family as opposed to a one-parent family?
That's a very good question.
That's a good question.
Because there's a lot of kids in blended families, 2 sets of parents, 2 homes, 2 dynamics. Surely it's getting more complex to have one answer to this.
No, I think consistent discipline is consistent discipline for children. I don't think children from, from 2-parent families turn out any better than 1-parent families.
What if they don't agree?
The parents.
This is the problem.
Yeah, and that's another part of behaviour management is getting that consistency between parents as well. That this is how we are going to parent our children.
My wife can raise her voice to my 3-year-old and 6-year-old boys, and they may at times they are perfect obviously, but they may sometimes giggle and ignore it. Whereas if I raise my voice, I get a completely
It's the
different
male
response.
voice though.
So
surely
with that,
has
just
a
with
lot
that
more
raising of
authority
a
in it.
voice, I mean that can be surely as damaging. Not raising like a little bit, but yelling. Is that...
Yeah, yelling is different to having a firm tone. So having a firm tone can be you're reinforcing the message that you want to get across about disciplining your child. But yelling is unpredictable for children, and it's unnecessary.
They get a
as
shock.
well.
I mean, I had a situation where I was in bare feet and my 4-year-old moved the stool, got on top of the stool with the prong of the stool on my toe, and I let a absolute yelp out of myself. And the look of horror on her face scared me, but I was just responding to an accident.
Situation. Yeah.
So
Maybe you should drop to the floor when they're being naughty. You just drop to the floor and yell, and they'll get.
Somebody did
freak out.
say that. Some child person did say that.
Let's have a look at some of the cultural, religious background differences. Just before we finish up, we've got about another minute to go. But have you come across that in your studies?
It's really interesting that actually when you look at the African American families, that a number of them have actually said to me that it's seen as a duty of care to children to actually smack in some instances, because historically for African Americans, if you weren't smacked in the home, the consequences that could actually happen if you were out on the street for bad behaviour could actually be, as a child being shot or maimed or really serious consequences, 30 years ago. So it was seen as a real duty of parents to show that, well, look, this is what will happen in the home, you've got to smack. But if you actually go out in the street and act like that, it's going to be a lot worse. So there's a real, there's a real sense that smacking in some instances is still an appropriate discipline measure. There's also, I think, what we need to look at in 29 countries around the world, smacking has been banned.
As in there's legislation to say you can't.
And if you look at the research from Sweden, it's been banned there for the longest interval, so since 1979. You look at the research coming out of there, they have got the lowest incidence of bullying and they have got the lowest incident of crime, actually. And we've got to look at ultimately what do we want to teach our children. If we're going to smack children, we're actually teaching them to model our behaviour.
Yeah, fantastic. Look, this is a long topic, isn't it? But we've kind of touched on it today. Lindsay, thank you for your time.
Pleasure. Lovely to be here.
Justin as well. You're going to sing for us.
Yeah. About disciplining children. No, I won't.
Yeah, about disciplining children. Justin back in just a moment, performing with his band Compliments of Gus. So stay tuned. Fabulous. Welcome back to Bayside TV. Performing their song Wonders of Your Love. Here's Justin and Nathan from Compliments of Gus. And you can get a hold of their album Collected on iTunes.
Would have wings like a dove to fly from trouble. Come the day of the Lord's return and fly away from trouble. Oh, that I would have wings like a dove to fly from trouble. Come the day of the Lord's return and fly away from trouble. But till that day I sing aloud of the wonders of your love, your great love. Sing aloud of the wonders of your love, your great love, and all your goodness we will sing. Oh, your great love, all your mercies we will sing. Oh, great love, hey! Hey, hey! Oh yeah! Oh, that this world's pain would not be weighed upon my shoulder. Oh, the comfort of your spirit make this height grow bolder. Oh, that this world's pain would not be weighed upon my shoulder. Oh, the comfort of your spirit makes this height grow bolder. And so this day I'll sing aloud of the wonders of your love, your great love. Sing aloud of the wonders of your love, your great love. Oh, your goodness we will sing. Oh, your great love, and all your mercies we will sing. Oh, your great, come on, hey! Lie, 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 lie. Your great love, lie, 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 wonders. Your great love, oh, your goodness we will sing. Oh, your great love, oh, your mercies we will sing. Oh, your great love. And so this day, and so this day, and so this day, and so this day, I'll sing aloud of the wonders of your love, your great love. Sing aloud of the wonders of your love, your great love. Oh, your goodness we will sing. Oh, your great love. Oh, your mercies we will sing. Oh,